Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world without central heating, electric blankets, or the quiet hum of a thermostat keeping you comfortable. Instead, it's you, your breath turning to mist in front of your face, and the biting air of a medieval winter settling into every corner of your life. The frost doesn't politely knock on the door. It barges in, seeps through cracks in the walls, and makes itself right at home in your joints. You probably wouldn't last a night, let alone a season in these conditions. But don't worry, you're not here to survive. You're here to listen, to imagine, and maybe to fall asleep before your toes metaphorically freeze off. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first bite of winter in your little medieval village isn't some cinematic snowfall. It's the wind. Sharp, damp, and coming in from the north. It snakes under your cloak and tugs at the gaps in your tunic. You notice it in the mornings first, when your breath looks like smoke, and the water in the wooden bucket has a thin sheet of ice. The ground hardens, refusing to give way beneath your boots. The crows in the field hunch their shoulders and hop awkwardly through the stiff grass, looking almost as miserable as you feel. Everyone in the village knows what this means. The freeze is coming and it won't be gentle. You trudge down the dirt path, which is quickly becoming a mud path, and see neighbors already hauling in the last bundles of firewood. Smoke curls from chimneys in thin, lazy ribbons that flatten against the pale sky. Somewhere nearby, the steady rhythm of an axe biting into logs carries across the damp air. Preparation isn't just about firewood, though. It's about sealing the house against the wind. Well, as much as a hut made of timber, wattle, and daub can be sealed. You push aside the hanging hide at your doorway and step inside. The warmth here is relative, warmer than outside, but still cool enough to keep you wrapped in your wool tunic. The smell of wood smoke clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, even the stale bread on the table. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasants' biggest challenge in winter was the cold itself, or the scarcity it brought with it. Either way, you feel both creeping closer every day. Your fingers are dry and cracked, the tips reddened, and your cheeks sting from the constant wind. You sit by the small hearth, its flames licking at the blackened stones. This isn't the sprawling fireplace of a manor house. It's just big enough for a few logs and a small iron pot that hangs over it. Heat radiates outward in a small circle, leaving the edges of the room still cool enough to see your breath. You pull your feet closer to the fire and let the warmth seep slowly into your bones, careful not to burn your worn leather shoes. Outside, the air has that particular stillness that comes before the first real snow. You remember how last year's frost claimed half the cabbages in the communal field, the outer leaves turning to limp, pale mush. This year, everyone is trying to bring in what they can before the temperature drops for good. The village isn't bustling like it does in summer. Everything is slowed down. Even the animals move differently. The chickens huddle together in the coop, feathers puffed up, while the goats seem to stand closer than usual in their pen. In a few weeks, you'll bring some of them into the house at night. Not because you're especially sentimental, but because every living thing inside adds a little more warmth. There's a certain smell in the air when winter begins in earnest, a mix of smoke, damp wool, and earth turned hard. You step outside again, pulling your cloak tight, and look toward the distant tree line. The forest is a deep gray-green, almost black under the heavy clouds. You know you'll be trudging there often in the coming months, gathering what little kindling you can find among the snowdrifts. It's not all grim, though. There's a strange comfort in this cycle. The same way you know where the best blackberries grow in summer, you know how the cold will settle in. You know which corner of the house stays warmest, which neighbor is the best at mending cloaks, and which path to the well is least likely to freeze over completely. And yet, that first bite of winter still carries a quiet warning. The days will shorten until the sun barely skims the horizon before vanishing. The nights will stretch endlessly, and the fire will be the center of your existence. You take one last look at the pale, cold sky before ducking back into the dim, smoky warmth of your home. The freeze has begun its slow, inevitable work, and you're just along for the ride. You're not exactly spoiled for choice when it comes to winter fashion. There's no neat pile of fleece-lined hoodies in your cupboard, no puffy jacket fresh from a department store sale. Instead, the season's survival kit comes down to one simple rule: wear everything you own, and then maybe borrow from your cousin if they're feeling generous. The first layer is a coarse linen shirt, summer's go-to garment, but now just the base you'll be piling misery upon. Over that, you tug on a wool tunic, its weave uneven and scratchy against your skin. This isn't the delicate, soft merino of modern times. It's the kind of wool that lets you know you're alive, because it itches in all the wrong places. Historians still argue whether peasants cared much about comfort at all, or if the cold simply made such concerns irrelevant. On top of that, you add another tunic, because one is laughably insufficient. If you're lucky enough to own a fur-lined cloak, you sling it over your shoulders. It smells faintly of smoke and faintly of goat, probably because at some point in its life, it was part of one. The fastening is a simple bronze pin, worn smooth by years of use. Then come the leggings, wool again naturally, and thick woolen socks if you've got them. If not, there's the slightly more desperate method of wrapping strips of cloth around your calves to hold in heat. Some people swear by stuffing dried straw inside their shoes for insulation. And yes, you've tried it. It's not pleasant, but it works. You run your fingers over the seams of your gloves, which are more like fingerless mittens. The tips of your fingers still poke out into the cold air, which makes you question the design entirely. A neighbor once told you about a trick for keeping your toes warm: urine-soaked wool socks. You'd dismissed it as the ravings of someone who'd been snowed in too long, until one night last year when the frost was so fierce you tried it. Let's just say, it's not an experience you're eager to repeat, but your toes did survive. The layering ritual is slow, methodical. You know exactly which spots need the most protection. The small of your back, where cold air loves to sneak in. Your ears, which sting and go numb within minutes. Your fingers, which are vital for chopping wood, hauling water, and eating without fumbling like a frozen scarecrow. By the time you've got every possible layer on, you move like a stuffed scarecrow yourself. Your arms stick out a little, your gait is stiff, and bending down to pick up anything becomes a calculated decision. Still, the alternative is frostbite, and you've seen what that does. Outside, the wind has picked up. It rushes down the open lane, rattling the loose shutters and sending dry leaves skittering along the frozen dirt. Your layered clothing traps heat, but it also traps the dampness of your own sweat, which you'll come to hate later when it cools against your skin. This is the medieval paradox. Keep warm, but not so warm you sweat, because then the cold will really find you. You pass by a group of children, each looking like a bundle of mismatched cloth scraps. Their wool caps are pulled low, covering half their faces. They laugh in sharp bursts of steam, tossing handfuls of frozen dirt at each other. Their mothers watch from doorways, arms crossed, reminding them to keep moving, because standing still means letting the cold creep in. One old man in the village still wears his lucky winter cloak, a relic from his father's time. It's patched in over a dozen places, the original fabric long hidden beneath layers of repair. Some say the fabric comes from old army tents, others from the remnants of a nobleman's hunting garb. No one really knows, and the man isn't telling. You've noticed he also keeps a dried clove of garlic pinned inside to ward off chill spirits. Whether that's warmth or superstition at work, you can't say. The light fades quickly, and as you trudge back home, you catch your reflection in the darkened window glass. You barely look like yourself anymore, just a shapeless, wool-clad figure moving through the haze of your own breath. But beneath all that, there's the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've done what you can to face the cold. When you duck back inside, you're met with the familiar scent of smoke and simmering broth. You loosen your cloak, but keep the inner layers on. It's still warmer out than it is in here somehow. Your neighbor's voice echoes in your head. Dressed like the cold is a hunter, and you're the last thing it wants to catch. You've survived the first day layered like an onion, but the real freeze hasn't even begun. The heart of your home isn't the table where you eat or the bed where you sleep. It's the hearth. In winter, it's more than a place for cooking. It's the center of survival. You don't just huddle near it for warmth. You orbit it like the sun, measuring your day by how close you can get without singeing your clothes. You kneel in front of the low stone hearth now, feeding in a couple of thin logs. The fire doesn't roar. Wood is too precious to waste like that. Instead, it crackles quietly, flames curling around the edges and licking the blackened pot suspended over the embers. The air is thick with smoke, because your chimney is more of a suggestion than a functional draft. Sometimes the smoke drifts lazily into the rafters, darkening them further, and sometimes it just sits low in the room until your eyes water. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants cared much about smoke damage to their lungs, or if they simply accepted it as part of life. Either way, you cough into your sleeve now and keep stoking the fire because there's no alternative. You settle onto the low bench, your knees drawn close to the flames. The warmth is uneven. Your shins feel toasty, but your back prickles with cold. Behind you, the walls breathe in drafts, carrying the chill straight down your neck. You shift, wrapping your cloak tighter, and lean in. The fire gives off a faint smell of resin from the pine logs you found last week, a small blessing in the otherwise smoky haze. The hearth also doubles as the village's newsstand. Neighbors drop in unannounced, partly for a chat, and partly because they just happen to be passing and fancy to warm up. A familiar knock rattles the doorframe now, and old Marta slips in, brushing snow from her shoulders. She sits beside you, holding out her hands to the heat. She's brought a chunk of stale bread which she warms on the hearthstone before chewing slowly. You talk idly, about how the river froze earlier than usual, about how someone's goat managed to escape into the woods. There's a rhythm to life here in winter. You feed the fire in small doses all day, never letting it go out. At night, you bank the embers with ash to keep them alive until morning. It's a careful balance. Too much fuel and you waste precious wood. Too little, and you wake up with frost on the inside of your window shutters. The hearth also draws the children, who sprawl on the floor, whispering games to each other while they inch closer and closer to the flames. Sometimes they hold their hands over the fire until the heat almost stings, pulling back and giggling like they've won some secret contest. And yet the hearth's heat barely extends a few feet. Beyond that circle of warmth, the room slips into shadow and cold. You can feel it when you step into the far corner. The air there is still and heavy, as if it's been left outside for hours. You've learned to work in layers, even indoors. If you need to mend clothes, you do it with your back to the fire so your fingers don't stiffen. If you need to prepare vegetables, you keep the chopping board close to the hearthstone. The fire's smoke clings to everything. Your cloak, your hair, even the wooden spoons. but it's the smell of safety, of survival. Sometimes, late at night, you watch the flames dance and let your thoughts drift. The fire becomes its own kind of entertainment, shapes shifting in the embers, shadows flickering on the walls. A neighbor once claimed you could read the future in those shapes, though whether they truly believed it or just wanted an excuse to stare into the flames longer is anyone's guess. Tonight the wind rattles the shutters and a fine dusting of snow pushes under the door. You nudge the logs closer together, coaxing the fire into a brighter glow. The warmth reaches up your arms, into your chest, loosening the tightness in your muscles. Outside, the cold presses in from every direction, but here, just here, it feels like you might have the upper hand. The day is done, and the light outside has faded into the kind of deep winter darkness that seems to arrive far too early. Inside, the small circle of warmth from the hearth beckons you closer, but there's another nightly ritual to attend to: bed. Or rather, the closest thing to bed a medieval peasant can hope for. Your sleeping arrangement isn't exactly a plush, private escape. It's a wide, low platform stuffed with straw, dry mostly, though you can still smell the faint mustiness from last summer's harvest. The straw crunches and shifts when you sit down, poking through the thin linen sheet that covers it. This sheet is more to keep the straw from scratching your skin than for warmth. That job belongs to the heap of blankets, cloaks, and whatever else you can pile on top. And you don't sleep alone. The bed is shared with your family. 2, 3, sometimes more if relatives happen to be staying over. In winter, space is heat, and every body adds another small measure of warmth to the collective huddle. It's not glamorous, but when the wind shrieks outside, you're grateful for the extra insulation. That insulation doesn't end with humans either. Out in the lean-to, your goat, 2 chickens, and the family's half-blind cat have been brought inside for the night. The animals huddle in a corner near the door, their breath steaming in the dim light. Historians still argue whether this was purely practical or if there was a sense of companionship in keeping livestock so close. You suspect it's a bit of both. After all, the goat gives off more heat than a cold wall ever could, and the cat, when she decides to, will curl against your feet like a living, purring hot stone. You remember your first winter in this house, how awkward it felt to sleep pressed up against so many people, their breathing and shifting keeping you half awake. Now it's just part of life. You've even learned the unspoken etiquette of shared sleeping. Keep your knees to yourself, don't hog the blanket, and if you need to turn over, do it slowly so you don't create a sudden rush of cold air. The straw mattress has its own quirks. Over time it flattens in places, creating little dips that collect your hips or shoulders like shallow bowls. Every week or so you have to fluff it, pulling the straw apart and rearranging it so it doesn't feel like you're sleeping on a lopsided hill. The smell never fully leaves, but there's something earthy and reassuring about it, a reminder that this is as close to nature as you can get without being in the field. Above you, the rafters creak as the wind pushes against the roof. You pull the blanket higher, tucking it around your chin, and feel the collective heat begin to build under the covers. The cold doesn't vanish. Your nose and cheeks still sting. But it becomes manageable, almost cozy in a rugged sort of way. Sometimes, before you fall asleep, you listen to the sounds of the room, the slow crackle of the fire as the last embers die down, the rhythmic breathing of those beside you, the faint rustle as someone shifts position, the occasional soft bleat from the goat. It's a patchwork lullaby, the noises of survival layered together until they blur into the background. You've heard of wealthier folk having feather beds, warm furs, even heated stones to place at their feet. You imagine sinking into such softness, the firelight flickering over carved wooden bedposts. But here, in the straw and wool, there's something more immediate. Your survival is a group effort. No one gets through winter alone. On especially bitter nights, someone might drape an extra cloak over the whole bed like a tent, trapping more warmth inside. The first breath you take in that little cocoon is heavy with the scent of wool, smoke, and straw, but it feels like a fortress against the cold. And when you finally close your eyes, you know that for all its discomforts, this shared bed is the warmest, safest place you'll find until spring arrives. The fire is low now, but it's never out, not in winter. On the hearth, a single iron pot hangs over the glowing embers, its lid rattling faintly as the contents shift with the heat. This is your supper, your breakfast, and possibly your lunch tomorrow, the ever-present soup that never ends. You lift the lid and a cloud of fragrant steam escapes, carrying the scent of onions, root vegetables, and something faintly smoky from yesterday's scraps of salted pork. The broth is thick, not because it was made to be that way, but because every day whatever is left in the pot is simply topped up with more water, more vegetables, and whatever bits of meat or grain happen to be available. It's less a recipe and more a living thing, constantly changing, never starting from scratch. Historians still argue whether this perpetual pot of stew was a deliberate culinary choice, or simply the only way to make meager supplies last through a long winter. Either way, you find comfort in the fact that the flavor deepens with each passing day. You take the ladle, worn smooth by years of use, and stir the contents slowly. A chunk of carrot bobs to the surface, followed by a piece of cabbage that's been in there long enough to surrender its crunch entirely. Somewhere at the bottom, you know there are beans, soft, creamy, and dense with the kind of calories that matter when the cold keeps trying to steal your body heat. Tonight's addition is a handful of barley from the storage bin, a gift from your neighbor in exchange for helping mend their fence. The grain will swell in the broth, adding a little bulk and a lot of comfort. The smell fills the room, a mixture of earthiness from the vegetables and the deep, slow sweetness of caramelized onion. You ladle out a bowl and carry it to your spot by the fire. The heat of the ceramic seeps into your fingers as you cup it, the steam rising into your face. The first sip is always the best. It burns a little on the tongue, but it feels like a line of warmth tracing down your throat and into your chest. It's not a rich man's feast. There's no roasted venison, no imported spices, no honeyed wine to follow. But there's a satisfaction in knowing every mouthful is the result of careful saving and quiet patience. You can taste the weeks of survival in it, the effort of gathering each ingredient, the unspoken cooperation of neighbors trading what they can spare. Children like to play a game with the soup, guessing what's in it today. Turnip, one says. Cabbage, another insists. Sometimes someone swears they taste something exotic like pepper, when in truth it's just the way the onions have browned at the bottom of the pot. Once, long ago, you remember there was pepper. One of the merchants had brought a small pouch from far away, and a pinch of it transformed the whole meal into something you still think about on the coldest nights. The pot is tended constantly. In the morning you bank the fire, bring the broth to a simmer, and stir in whatever's left from yesterday's bread or meat. At midday, you add whatever scraps you've managed to gather, more root vegetables, dried herbs, maybe the last slice of an apple that's just starting to soften. And at night, it becomes the gathering point, the place where everyone's hands reach for a warm bowl and a seat by the hearth. Outside, the wind presses against the walls, making the shutters rattle in their frames. You take another spoonful, savoring the way it chases away the cold from your core. You know the pot will still be here in the morning, still bubbling, still giving, still carrying the history of every winter you've ever endured. By the time you set your empty bowl aside, the warmth from the soup has joined forces with the fire, leaving you heavy-limbed and drowsy. The cold may have its grip on the world outside, but here, In the glow of the hearth with the pot gently simmering, you feel like you've stolen back a little victory. Morning comes reluctantly in the heart of winter, the sky a dull gray that barely passes for daylight. You wake to the faint crackle of the fire being coaxed back to life, and the cold nipping at your nose. There's no chance to linger under the covers. You've got frozen chores waiting. You pull on yesterday's clothes because in this season there's no point changing unless you have something warmer, which you don't. The wool is stiff from the chill, and your boots are as heavy as bricks. Outside, the air hits you like a wall, instantly turning your breath into pale clouds that hang and drift before dissolving. The first task is feeding the animals. The goat bleats impatiently, stamping in the frost-hardened dirt. You scoop grain into a trough, your fingers clumsy and red in the cold, and break the thin layer of ice that's formed on their water. The chickens huddle together, reluctant to move, their feathers puffed out like tiny, grumpy cloaks. You scatter feed for them, watching as they dart forward, their movements quick but cautious. Historians still argue whether peasants in these months worked slower out of necessity or sheer lack of energy. But you find it's not so much choice as the body's protest against the cold. Every motion feels heavier, as though the frost itself is tugging at your limbs. Next is chopping wood, a chore that never ends in winter. The axe's handle is worn smooth, and your palms sting as you grip it. The log before you is cold and unyielding, the sound of each strike ringing through the still air like a bell. Splinters fly, breath steams, and after a few swings, your muscles start to burn. You keep going anyway, stacking the split pieces neatly by the door where they'll be within reach when the fire needs feeding. Some mornings you fetch water from the well, which is its own test of patience. The rope creaks as you lower the bucket, the pulley stiff from the cold. When it comes back up, the water inside is so cold it stings your hands just to touch it. By the time you carry it back to the house, thin crystals might already be forming along the surface. A quirky old trick you've learned is to keep your breath from freezing your eyelashes. Yes, it happens. By turning your head slightly as you walk so the steam from your mouth doesn't rise directly into your face. It's one of those little survival habits you never thought about until winter taught you. You notice how the world feels quieter on mornings like this. The snow, when it comes, muffles every sound. Even without snow, the frozen ground swallows footsteps, and the air is so still that you can hear the faintest creak of a tree branch or the distant bark of a dog. There's no escaping the fact that these chores have to be done daily, without fail. If you skip feeding the animals, they won't survive the night. If you don't chop wood, the fire will die. If you neglect to fetch water, you'll be melting snow for drinking. And snow never quite tastes right, faintly metallic, as though it's stolen something from the air on its way down. By the time you finish, your hands are stiff, your cheeks flushed, and the promise of that warm hearth pulls you back inside like a rope. You stomp the frost from your boots and feel the first lick of heat on your face as you cross the threshold. It's a small reward for a morning's work, but in winter, these small victories are what keep you going. And tomorrow you'll do it all again because the cold never waits. By midday, the sun has managed to push through the clouds just enough to turn the gray light into something softer, though it still carries no warmth. You're outside again, but this time for a task that feels a little less like survival and a little more like community, patching the thatch on the roof. The roof is your first line of defense against the cold, and in winter, any weakness becomes a disaster. A small gap lets in drafts. A bigger one could let in snow or rain, soaking the interior and chilling everything inside. You balance a bundle of fresh straw under one arm as you climb the short wooden ladder, feeling the rungs icy beneath your fingers. Thatched roofs are deceptively clever. Layer upon layer of straw, angled just so, sheds water and traps heat. It's a design that's been around for centuries, And historians still argue whether peasants learned the technique from their own trial and error, or borrowed it from older, more organized building traditions. Either way, you're grateful for it every time the wind howls. You wedge new straw into the weak spots, pressing it in tightly, then bind it down with rope so the winter gales won't tear it away. Your fingers ache with the cold, but you work quickly, partly because efficiency keeps you warm, and partly because you'd rather not be perched up here longer than necessary. When you finish, you pause for a moment to look out over the village. Smoke curls lazily from every chimney, each thread of it marking a home where someone else is tending a fire, boiling soup or huddling under blankets. The smell of wood smoke is everywhere, sharp, earthy, almost sweet, and it's as much a part of winter as the frost on the ground. Back on the ground, you pass by the communal bread oven. It's a low, rounded dome of stone, still radiating heat from the morning's baking. Villagers take turns using it, each bringing their own dough to slide in with the long-handled wooden paddle. The bread that emerges is dense, chewy, and sometimes a little scorched, but it's worth the effort. You trade a bundle of firewood for a loaf still warm from the oven. The crust crackles in your hands as you break it open, steam billowing into the frigid air. The inside is soft, the smell rich and yeasty. It's tempting to eat the whole thing right there, but you know it needs to last at least 2 days. Still, you allow yourself one thick slice, slathered with a smear of rendered fat saved from the last slaughter day. It's not butter, but it's rich and filling, and it lingers on your tongue like a promise that you won't go hungry tonight. A quirky trick you've picked up is wrapping the rest of the loaf in cloth and tucking it near the hearth. Not so close that it bakes further, but near enough to keep it from going stale too fast. In the cold, bread hardens almost overnight, and soft bread in winter is a small luxury. Before heading in, you check the small stack of root vegetables stored in the corner by the door. Turnips, carrots, and parsnips all keep well in the cold if you pile them with a bit of straw and make sure the frost doesn't get in. They're not exciting, but they keep you alive. As the day's light begins to fade again, so soon after it seemed to begin, you find yourself grateful for the little things: a repaired roof, a warm loaf of bread, and the sight of smoke curling from your chimney. These aren't grand victories, but in winter, they're the kind that matter most. Night falls early again, swallowing the village in darkness long before you feel ready for it. The moon's pale glow spills over the frost-crusted ground, but it's the flicker of the hearth inside that calls you back home. You step through the doorway and the cold seems to lift off your shoulders, replaced by that familiar dry heat of wood smoke and glowing embers. Inside, the center of the room is the hearth, but the true heart of the home in winter is the bed, or rather, the sleeping arrangement. It's not just you here. It never is in a peasant's winter. Family members sleep in the same bed, or as close as possible, because shared body heat can mean the difference between a restless night and a dangerous one. Your mattress is a sack of straw, flattened in places but still springy enough to keep you from feeling the cold earth beneath. Each season, you stuff it with fresh straw to keep the smell from turning too musty. On top, you spread the heaviest woolen blankets you own, some patched so many times they're more repair than original weave. Tonight, you bring in a warmed stone wrapped in cloth from the hearthside. It's an old, quirky trick. Leave a flat stone by the fire for an hour, wrap it tight, and place it at the foot of the bed. It radiates heat for a surprising amount of time, just enough to keep your toes from feeling like ice. Historians still argue whether this was common across all peasant homes or a habit more often found in regions with harsher winters. But you know it works, and that's all that matters. There's also the matter of layering your sleepwear. You're still in your day clothes, but you loosen them for comfort and pull on an extra wool tunic along with a hat. Yes, a hat indoors and in bed. It's one of those things you'd laugh about in summer, but tonight, It feels like the height of wisdom. The human body loses a surprising amount of heat through the head, and this way you trap every bit you can. As you settle under the covers, the warmth begins to pool around you. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, and you imagine the snow drifting in the fields, settling like a thick white blanket over the land. Your body adjusts slowly to the stillness, your breathing syncing with the faint crackle from the hearth. You're not alone in using these tricks. Across the village, other homes are arranged much the same. Families huddled close, beds stuffed with straw, stones wrapped in cloth. Some sleep in lofts built above the main room, letting the heat from the fire rise up to them. Others bring animals inside for the night, not just for their protection but for the shared warmth. A goat or two in the corner can raise the temperature of a small space surprisingly well. The rhythm of winter life is one of conserving and rationing. Heat, food, energy. There's no pretending otherwise. Even now you think ahead to tomorrow. More wood to chop, more snow to clear if it comes, more careful tending of the fire so the cold never gets the upper hand. But for this moment, you let yourself sink into the warmth, cocooned in layers. The stone at your feet, a silent guardian against the night. And just before sleep takes you, you notice the faintest smell of the soup pot still lingering in the air, a reminder that tomorrow's heat will start not with the sun, but with the simmer of broth and the glow of embers in the hearth. Morning comes reluctantly again, not with a burst of light, but with a slow graying of the world beyond the shutters. The fire has died down to embers, their glow faint and orange in the dim room. You stretch under the covers, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders from yesterday's work, and then it's time to coax the fire back to life. First, you rake the ashes gently to uncover the warmest coals, then lay down a few thin twigs. You blow softly until the ember glows brighter, the air in your lungs puffing into the ashes. A lick of flame catches, then another, and you add larger pieces of wood, feeling a quiet satisfaction as the fire begins to crackle again. Without this small morning ritual, the room would stay bitterly cold for hours. The first task is breakfast, though that word means something different here. There's no stack of pancakes or steaming porridge, just whatever is left from last night's soup pot, reheated and thinned out with water. You sip it slowly, the warmth spreading from your throat to your chest. It's thin, but hearty enough to give you a start. Outside, the world is still frozen, frost clinging to every surface. The fields lie silent, their furrows buried under ice and snow. In winter, the land rests, but you don't. The animals still need feeding, the water still needs carrying, and your own body still needs moving to stay warm. Today's work is repairing the wooden fence around the small vegetable plot. It may seem strange to tend to a garden in winter when nothing grows, but this is when you mend the damage, fixing posts, replacing rails, so that when spring comes, the fence is ready to keep out hungry wildlife. The ground is so hard from frost that every post you drive in sends a dull ache up your arms. But as you work, you find a certain rhythm, lift, swing, drive, adjust, that keeps your body warm without even noticing. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants thought of these winter chores as drudgery or simply as the unchanging pattern of life. Standing here, breath steaming in the cold, you suspect it was a bit of both. At midday, you stop for a small break and unwrap the bread you've been saving, still faintly soft thanks to its spot near the hearth. You chew slowly, savoring each bite, because you know there won't be more until supper. A few slices of dried apple, leathery and tangy, make a welcome change from the usual fare, a treat saved from the autumn harvest. One quirky winter habit you've picked up is using the cold to your advantage for food storage. You hang small bundles of herbs outside in the frost, not to dry them, but to keep them from spoiling until you need them. The cold preserves their oils, so when you crumble them into a pot of broth, the flavor bursts through as if they were fresh. As the afternoon fades, you feel that familiar pull toward the hearth again. Your work is done for now, the fence standing sturdier than before, the animals fed and bedded down. You step inside, the smell of wood smoke and stew wrapping around you like a blanket. Tomorrow will be another day of much the same, because in this season survival is a series of small, repeated victories, and you've just earned another. By the time the next day rolls around, the cold has deepened. You can feel it in your bones the moment you step out of bed. That particular kind of chill that bites at your nose and makes the tips of your fingers ache before you've even reached for your boots. The fire is low again, a few sullen embers tucked under gray ash, and it takes more coaxing than usual to get it roaring. Once the warmth starts creeping back into the room, you turn your attention to a less obvious winter necessity, mending clothes. In summer, you can get away with a frayed sleeve or a hole at the knee. But in winter, that's an open invitation to misery. You sit near the hearth, needle in hand, working on a pair of woolen hose that have worn thin at the heels. The light from the fire flickers over your fingers as you stitch, each pull of the thread a reminder that clothes are as much armor as they are comfort. Wool is your best ally. Even when it's damp, it holds heat, which is a blessing in a climate where snowmelt and icy fog are constant companions. You patch the hose with scraps saved from older garments, the mismatched colors telling a quiet story of years gone by. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants cared much about appearance in winter, but here, survival trumps fashion every time. Mid-morning brings another chore, hauling water. The well is a short walk away, but the bucket feels twice as heavy when the air is sharp enough to sting your lungs. The wooden handle is cold against your palm, and the surface of the water has a thin skin of ice you have to break before dipping in. You carry it home carefully. Spilling even a little means another trip. Back indoors, you pour some into a pot over the fire for cooking, and keep the rest in a covered jar near the hearth so it doesn't freeze. It's a small but crucial detail. Waking up to frozen drinking water is a problem you don't want to have. By midday, the cold outside has turned the ground into glass. Paths are slick with ice, and every step demands caution. But you still need to fetch more firewood, and the pile is nearly gone. You head to the edge of the village where the logs are stacked, frosted white and stubbornly heavy. Splitting them is slow work in this weather, but you know from experience that the exercise will warm you better than standing by the fire could. A quirky trick you've picked up for this chore is tucking a hot stone from the hearth into your coat pocket before heading out. It's like carrying a tiny sun against your side, enough to keep your core warm until your muscles take over. When you finally drag the new wood back home, the sun is already sinking. Supper tonight is a thick stew, richer than usual because a neighbor traded you a few chunks of salted pork. You drop them into the pot along with carrots, turnips, and a handful of barley, the smell filling the room as the broth darkens and thickens. As the night settles in, you wrap yourself again in the patched blankets, your body sore but satisfied. Every stitch you sewed today, every log you split, every bucket you carried, all of it threads together into the simple truth of winter survival. You do what you must, and you do it again tomorrow. The cold wakes you before the light does. Your breath fogs the air above your face, hanging there in faint clouds before fading into nothing. The embers are completely dead this time, a silent hearth that forces you into the morning with no choice but to start from scratch. You move quickly, your fingers clumsy from the chill as you stack dry twigs and kindling, strike flint, and coax the smallest flame into being. It's stubborn today, reluctant to catch, but you persist, leaning in close until the fire takes hold. The crackle is almost a relief in itself, proof you're not about to spend the day shivering in the dark. Today's main task is one that's easy to forget until winter forces you to remember: repairing the roof. The snow has started to slide in through gaps in the thatch, landing in tiny white heaps on the floor overnight. You climb up to the roof, the ladder creaking under your weight, and work with numb hands to tuck fresh bundles of straw into place. It's slow, awkward work, but each bundle is another shield against the cold creeping in. Historians still argue whether peasants routinely did winter thatching or waited until warmer months. But when snow starts falling inside, you don't wait for an academic consensus. Once the roof is patched, you head down to the stream. The surface is frozen over now, the ice thick enough to hold your weight if you dared to step on it. But you won't. You use the back of your axe to break through, leaning over the hole to scoop up clean water. The sound of the crack spreading through the ice is sharp, echoing in the quiet winter air. Back home, you pour the water into a pot to warm for washing. Even in winter, you try to keep clean. Dirt and sweat are no less uncomfortable when it's cold. The steam curling up from the warm water feels almost luxurious as you splash it over your face and hands, your skin prickling with the sudden change in temperature. By midday, a pale sun struggles through the clouds, and you use the light to check on the food stores. The turnips in the root cellar are holding up well, and the smoked fish from autumn still hangs in neat rows from the rafters. You cut down one, slicing it into the evening stew along with cabbage and a pinch of dried parsley. A green touch that feels like a memory of summer. A quirky bit of winter wisdom says to keep a small loaf of bread near the sleeping area, not for eating, but to make sure the air isn't too damp. If the bread molds too quickly, you know it's time to improve ventilation before illness creeps in. You've been doing it all season, and so far, the bread is holding up fine. That night, as you settle back into bed with the warm stone at your feet, you listen to the wind whip around the patched roof. It holds firm, and the snow stays where it belongs, outside. You close your eyes with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for tonight at least, the house is ready for whatever the cold sends next. The morning air is sharper than usual, a kind of cold that bites at your skin the moment you push back the blankets. You can tell it's going to be one of those days when even the air inside feels brittle, like you could snap it in two if you tried. The fire's low again, but you're getting good at reviving it. Flint, spark, patience, and the soft puff of your breath. Once the room begins to thaw, you pull on your thickest wool tunic and step outside. Today's job is less about food or fire, and more about keeping the animals alive. The chickens are fluffed up like feathered snowballs, huddled together in the corner of their coop. You scatter a mix of grain and scraps, and they move sluggishly toward it, scratching at the frozen ground. The goats are next. Their water has turned to ice again, so you tip the bucket, smash the crust with a stick, and refill it from the pail you hauled in from the stream earlier. They nudge your arm impatiently, their warm breath puffing against your sleeve as you set the bucket down. You notice one of the fence posts has shifted, leaning from the frost heave in the soil. If you don't fix it, you'll have a hole big enough for trouble to slip through. So you take the time to straighten it, packing the frozen earth back into place with your boots. Mid-morning brings a rare winter chore, checking the bee scaps. Most people think bees vanish in winter, but they're still inside, clustered together to keep warm. You don't open the scaps. You just press your ear to the side and listen for the faint hum inside. It's there, soft but steady. You smile, knowing that come spring, they'll be ready to work again. Historians still argue whether peasants kept bees primarily for honey or wax, but in winter, you're just glad they've survived another frost. Back indoors, you warm your hands by holding them over the steaming pot where cabbage and onions simmer. You stir slowly, the wooden spoon tapping against the side in a steady rhythm. A handful of dried nettles goes in next. Not much for flavor, but packed with what little winter vitamins you can get. A quirky tip you picked up from an older neighbor comes to mind. If you hang damp laundry in the loft above the hearth, the heat will dry it while also adding moisture to the air. In a season when breathing feels like inhaling sandpaper, that extra humidity is a blessing. By the time the sun sets, early as always, you've fed the animals, mended a coat, hauled water, and prepared tomorrow's firewood stack. It doesn't feel heroic, but in winter, it's not the grand acts that matter. It's the quiet, steady work that gets you through. You crawl into bed with a full belly, listening to the muffled cluck of the chickens and the low, steady sigh of the goats in their shelter. The day greets you with silence, the kind that comes after a heavy snowfall. When you push open the door, the outside world is muted, blanketed in white so deep it swallows sound. Your footprints are the first to disturb the perfect surface, each step sinking halfway to your knees. Snow like this is both a gift and a curse. It traps the worst of the cold under its cover, making the air slightly warmer, but it also makes travel nearly impossible. You can feel your calves burn as you trudge to the woodpile, the logs buried beneath a crust of snow that you brush away with your gloves. Today, the focus is on fortifying your living space. Snow drifts have piled against the north wall, and while they insulate, they also put pressure on the structure. You take a shovel and carefully carve a narrow path around the house, keeping the snow piled high but not pressing too heavily against the timbers. Inside, you notice condensation on the inside of the shutters. It's a reminder to rotate the bedding. Moisture in the blankets can lead to a chill that creeps in while you sleep. You hang the thickest quilts near the fire and swap them for lighter coverings during the day. By midday, your stomach growls for something hearty. You set about making a thick pottage with lentils, carrots, and a scrap of salted beef. The smell fills the air, earthy and rich, and you think of how this same recipe has probably been cooked in countless huts just like yours for hundreds of years. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants varied their recipes much in winter, but judging by the repetitive ingredients, variety wasn't the priority. Staying alive was. After eating, you decide to make use of the snow itself. You fill a small bucket with clean snow and set it by the fire to melt for washing. It's a trick that saves a trip to the stream and gives you a ready supply of warm water by evening. A quirky superstition from your grandmother surfaces in your mind. Leaving a small bowl of milk outside during a heavy snow will keep the winter spirits from playing tricks on your animals. You're not sure you believe it, but you do it anyway. The milk freezes solid within an hour, but you feel oddly reassured. As night falls, you can hear the snow sliding off the thatch in soft, heavy thuds. The house creaks under the shifting weight, but it holds steady. Wrapped in your warmed blankets, you drift off with the faint smell of lentils lingering in the air and the muffled hush of snow all around. The snow outside has settled into that tired gray stage, still thick but no longer fresh or bright. You notice it as you step out to fetch water, your boots crunching through a thin crust of ice that formed overnight. The air feels different now. There's still a sting to it, but it's gentler, as though winter is finally exhaling after holding its breath for months. You've started noticing little hints of the thaw to come, a steady drip from the eaves, a patch of dark earth peeking through near the south-facing wall, the faint smell of damp soil instead of the metallic bite of frost. It's not spring yet, but it's a promise. The chores don't change much. Animals still need tending, wood still needs chopping, but your pace feels lighter. You no longer need to rush every task for fear of losing heat. Today, you take your time stacking the wood neatly, even arranging it by size. You patch a tear in your gloves with a scrap of leather, not because you must, but because you finally can. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants marked the changing seasons with specific rituals or just rolled with the weather. But you find yourself daydreaming about the first green shoots, the smell of fresh herbs, the buzzing of bees waking up in the sun. For now, the meals are still the same. cabbage, barley, salted fish. But you begin to set aside small things for that first spring feast. A bit of honeycomb, the last handful of dried apples, a pinch of herbs you'd been saving for months. There's a quirky belief that if you whistle at the end of winter, you'll call the warmth faster. You test it one afternoon while feeding the goats, your breath making little clouds in the air as you try a tune you can barely remember. The goats ignore you, but the sound feels cheerful anyway. That evening, you sit by the fire a little longer than usual, staring at the orange glow as if it might hold some secret about the days ahead. The wind outside is softer now, no longer howling, just sighing past the door. You pull your blanket tighter, close your eyes, and imagine the thaw arriving in the night. The thaw doesn't arrive all at once, it creeps in quietly, in the faint smell of wet earth and the steady drip of meltwater from the roof. You wake to the sound of it, a slow rhythm tapping against the ground outside. The air in the hut feels different, still cool but no longer biting, like winter is losing its grip 1 degree at a time. You push open the door and see the snow receding in uneven patches, revealing tufts of flattened grass and dark, soggy soil. The stream is running freely again, its surface broken with bits of drifting ice. You kneel and cup your hands into the frigid water, letting it spill through your fingers just because you can. The animals sense the change too. The chickens venture farther from their coop, scratching at the exposed earth in search of something fresh to eat. The goats bleat impatiently, eager to roam beyond their fenced patch. You smile at their restlessness. It mirrors your own. Inside, you open the shutters to let in the pale sunlight. It warms the room just enough that you decide to air out the bedding, carrying blankets outside to drape over a fence post. The cold breeze chases away the musty scent of months spent huddled indoors. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants celebrated the first thaw as a formal event, but for you, this is celebration enough. Light in the morning, softer air, and the knowledge that you've endured another winter. You start on a meal that feels almost decadent after so many months of monotony, the last of the dried apples stewed with honey, served alongside barley bread. The smell fills the room, sweet and warm, making it feel like spring has already arrived. A quirky custom says you should toss a pinch of grain toward the sun on the first truly warm day to thank it for returning. You step outside and do exactly that, watching the grains scatter in the light. As night falls, the air outside is still cold, but you sleep without the warmed stone at your feet for the first time in months. You've made it through the coldest nights, carrying every lesson of survival with you into the softer days ahead. The room is quiet now, the fire reduced to a deep glowing red that pulses softly in the dark. You can feel the air around you shift. Still, calm, the kind of stillness that wraps around you like another blanket. Every sound is muted. Even the wind outside has faded to the faintest whisper. You picture the snow melting in slow motion, droplets sliding off the roof, gathering into tiny streams that wind their way toward the brook. You imagine the animals settled for the night, their breathing slow and steady, their bodies warm in their shelters. Somewhere beyond the dark fields, the forest stands silent, each branch holding the last crystals of frost before they vanish with the morning light. The smell of the hearth lingers, wood smoke and the faint sweetness of the meal you cooked earlier. You let your mind drift to the comfort of small things, the way your hands feel warm even without the fire, the softness of the bedding under your weight, the heaviness in your eyelids that tells you rest is already here. Breathe in slowly, feeling the air fill your chest, then let it out just as slowly, imagining it carrying away the last tension of the day. Your thoughts become softer, lighter, like the first green shoots pushing through the soil after months of snow. In the quiet, You can almost hear the seasons turning. There's no rush, no need to hold on to anything. Just the slow rhythm of your breath, the warmth of the blankets, and the sense that you are safe, warm, and exactly where you need to be. Sleep takes you gently as the last embers fade to black. End of script. Sweet dreams.